Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. The British military says 7 Afghan civilians have been killed in a stampede while trying to enter Kabul's international airport. The deaths come after the US and Germany advised their citizens against traveling to the airport, citing security reasons. Meanwhile, forces holding out against the Taliban claim to have taken 3 districts in northern Afghanistan. In Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan's Boya area. In a statement, the military's media wing said weapons and ammunition were recovered from the killed terrorist. Meanwhile, an army captain was martyred after a security forces vehicle struck an IED planted by terrorists in Balochistan. Israel has violated ceasefire yet again, bombing Gaza after wounding 41 Palestinians with gunfire on the border. The Israeli military said its warplane struck Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. The raids came hours after Israeli soldiers opened fire on hundreds of Palestinians protesting near the Strip's border. Mexico has reported nearly 850 deaths from COVID-19 and over 20,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 75 more people lost their lives to the virus and over 3,800 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 211 million, while the death toll is over 4.42 million. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. The UK says 7 Afghan civilians have been killed in a stampede while trying to enter Kabul's airport. The Defence Ministry said conditions on the ground remain extremely challenging. It said over 3,800 individuals have been evacuated since the 13th of August. Australia has evacuated over 300 citizens and foreign nationals from Kabul overnight, whereas the US and Germany advised their citizens against traveling to the airport, citing security reasons. But witnesses say the Taliban have imposed some order around the chaotic Kabul airport. A spokesperson said the group is aiming to provide a smooth exit for those who want to leave over the weekend. Meanwhile, former President Hamid Karzai and Chief Negotiator Abdullah discussed the Afghan situation with the Taliban. Forces holding out against the Taliban claim to have taken 3 districts near Panjshir Valley. Earlier, Kabul said its forces have captured districts of Pul Hisar, De Salah and Banu in Baghlan province. Meanwhile, Pakistan says it wants an inclusive government in Afghanistan that respects human rights. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says Islamabad wants to be a partner in peace and could be the most trusted mediator. In an interview, he said Pakistan has been calling for a continuous negotiations process along with the date of withdrawal. The foreign minister said Pakistan is currently engaged in evacuating people from Kabul, but it is not being acknowledged. Qureshi said the world did not listen when Islamabad said the Kabul government was corrupt and did not enjoy political support. He deplored that Pakistan was not responsible for 9/11, yet it suffered 80,000 casualties and $150 billion worth of economic loss. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has attacked President Joe Biden's handling of American forces' withdrawal from Afghanistan. At a rally in Alabama, Trump called it the greatest foreign policy humiliation in U.S. history. He said Biden's botched exit is the most astonishing display of gross incompetence by a nation's leader. The Republican added this is not a withdrawal but total surrender. In another development, the United Kingdom said it will have to turn to Russia and China to exercise a moderating influence over the Taliban. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair condemned what he called the West's abandonment of Kabul as dangerous and unnecessary. In an article, Blair noted the US pullout decision was driven by politics and not by grand strategy. Meanwhile, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is convening an extraordinary session on the Afghanistan situation today. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, security forces have killed a terrorist during an intelligence-based operation in North Waziristan's Boya area. In a statement, the military said it also recovered weapons and ammunition from the slain terrorist. The ISPR said a search operation is underway to eliminate any other terrorists in the area. Meanwhile, an army captain was martyred after a security forces vehicle struck an IED planted by terrorists in Balochistan. The ISPR said 2 other soldiers got injured in the incident that occurred in Gitchik's Tobo area. Now, India's miscalculations in Afghanistan have badly exposed as an old video of its national security advisor Ajit Doval is once again doing the rounds on social media, in which he appears completely clueless about Afghanistan. Addressing an event of the US-India Political Action Committee in 2013, Doval boasted that there can never come a time when the Taliban would take over Afghanistan again. The entire contents of Doval's speech did not age well at all, considering the current situation in Afghanistan. In the video, he can be seen discrediting Pakistan's military generals for even considering it as a possibility. The video clearly proves that the Pakistan Army's understanding and reading of the situation in Afghanistan is far superior to that of India. Now, to talk more on this, we have been joined by General Retired Amjad Shoaib. Sir, thank you very much for your time. Now, this video of Ajit Doval has surfaced, and in which he claims that the Indian forces had trained the Afghan forces greatly, and it just comes as an upset to the entire Indian nation and armed forces, sir.
Personally, I think he is an overrated person, and he has some false hair about himself. He is a man who can create problems, he can create mischief, he can be a source of terrorism, but he's not a man of peace, doesn't have that kind of farsightedness. So naturally, he perhaps has been thinking in his own way, and this is what he has done to Afghanistan. It is for the Afghan people to think about it. Do they need peace, or they want people like him who are experts in deception, experts in terrorism? He is the person who perhaps has led Afghanistan to this situation where perhaps their forces have collapsed. Their entire system has collapsed at the moment. There is no government for the time being. And I just hope that ultimately Taliban and the other stakeholders, they'll be able to come up with some kind of consensus solution. If they don't do that, then naturally this turmoil will continue. Ajit Doval, I think right from the first day, right from the day one, this man, when he took charge, he never had the intention of bringing some peace to Afghanistan. For peace and tranquility, there was no need of training the forces or building up an army. There was a need to bring all the stakeholders on one table and try to create some kind of consensus, some kind of arrangement, agreement between them, where they could share the power. And even today, we are saying that this is the only solution, otherwise they'll keep on fighting against each other. He was the man who was responsible for preventing Ashraf Ghani from joining the peace process. They have been pumping arms into his armories and telling him not to negotiate with the Taliban. When the Taliban were prepared to negotiate the peace process or peace agreement with them, or power sharing agreement with them, these people, they asked them to adopt the path of war. And ultimately, you have seen Ashraf Ghani had to run away. His entire coterie, his entire clan is now at the run. and I don't know what will be their future. But India is responsible. Then we come to their training. They had trained more than 1,000 officers of the Afghan army. And all of them, as I think Joe Biden mentioned, that training is all right, but you cannot give some kind of intention or courage for a person to fight. So that was lacking. And then they had tribal loyalties, and because of the tribal loyalties, they were looking in different directions, most of them. The officers' class was from the north, and the fighting soldiers, foot soldiers, they were from south and east, Pakhtun, from the Pakhtun belt. So I think Taliban or Pakhtun and most of the soldiers, they didn't want to fight against them. So these are the things which Pakistan or Pakistani officers have time and again pointed to them, because we were serious about peace in Afghanistan. And all along we have been saying that for peace in Pakistan, we need to have peace in Afghanistan too. So that was the issue there. I think not only Ajit Doval, he went wrong, but he also was able to misguide the entire international community, where they started pouring in money and also the weapons, and ultimately they were able to buy a few politicians from Afghan society and build up an army which was not capable of giving any fight.
Right. Also, Mr. Shoaib, also shed some light on this now. Mr. Doval made some claims about the Pakistan military's, discrediting the Pakistan military's understanding of Afghanistan, but they ended up being proven right in the end. How did this happen?
See, the point is understanding. As far as Pakistan is concerned, we have people from the same ethnicity living in KPK, and many of them, they are holding key positions in our setup, particularly in the army also. We have about 40% Pakhtuns in our army, and there is better understanding because we live with each other. And not only within the army, but also, today you have a defense minister, he's a Pakhtun. You have a large number of KPK people and Pakhtuns working in civil services also and elsewhere. So when you live with each other, you know the mindset, you also know the traditions, and you also know the sources of the loyalties. So that way, I think our assessments were always correct. And Ajit Doval was just talking out of his hat. He perhaps didn't have that kind of experience, ground experience where he could have faced the realities.
Right. Also, Mr. Shoaib, tell us now, the Ghani government, India, was facilitating and in every way that extraordinary access in Afghanistan could have been made possible to an unusually high number of Indian operatives and intel personnel. But despite all that, why do you think the situational assessment was so wrong? See, India had their own, I would say, their own interests and their own objectives which they wanted to achieve, and these objectives are purely against Pakistan. Even if they had known that this thing is not going to work, they would have made an effort to pitch up things against Pakistan, because that was their main objective. Afghanistan is a Muslim country. Do you think they will have any special love for these Muslims when they are treating so badly their own Muslim population in India? People are being lynched on the roadsides in the name of cow raksha. These cow raksha, even a cow is more valuable than the human life. They can kill everybody, any Muslim. So that was there, that they had no special love for the Afghan Muslims, except that they wanted some kind of foothold there and play the devil's role within Pakistan. And for that, they need to pump in money in the Afghani's coffers and also in the pockets of other politicians, so that they start fighting with them, and also try for buying the loyalties of the army by training them in their own institutions, and also by training the intelligence people in their own institutions. So they did their bit, and kept on feeding false information, false narratives
through their own loyal intelligence officers to Ashraf Ghani and various other people, trying to build up a picture that for all their miseries and problems, it is Pakistan which is responsible for everything. So this is something which perhaps we could not really correct at that time or counter that narrative, due to which we had very serious problems in Afghanistan, where people, ordinary people, they started thinking that Pakistan is not a friendly country. They are responsible for all the problems of Afghanistan, and it is India which is spending money also, and they are very sincere to Afghan common men, whereas they were not. And even today, I think Indians will continue doing some mischief. It has to be a bigger effort by Pakistan to clarify the things, to tell to the Afghan people that, look, this is the only way, this is the only possibility of bringing peace to Afghanistan, that you have a sort of unanimous solution, try to negotiate with each other. And this is what Pakistan has been trying. I mean, all along we have been saying that there are no favorites as far as Pakistan is concerned. Taliban are not our favorite, but we know that Taliban are a force. You can't really just remove them from the surface of earth and be happy about it. So they have to be taken into the entire game, and they have to sit down with the other stakeholders and work out a solution where they can live side by side and can work for the betterment of their people.
Right, Mr. Shoaib, lastly, we know India is no philanthropist nation, and its motives in Afghanistan, it's confused because how India treats its minorities in India, we have seen, and this is the fact, India butchers Muslims in its own nation. So what were the motives? Obviously, there wasn't to support the Afghan Muslims, as Afghanistan is a Muslim majority country. What were the motives India had when they stepped foot in Afghanistan?
See, India's motives are very clear. They enjoyed the protection of NATO and America. They were there and right under their nose, under their open eyes. They have been promoting terrorism from Afghan soil into Pakistan. They have been accommodating all the terrorist groups, and that was their main objective. But for that, they had to have a comfortable position within the Afghan society. They wanted to create that, and for that they pumped in the money, tried to buy the Afghan society and also prominent people and also the legislators. So this was their game, but it all happened because of the United States and NATO forces, because they were the ones who were promoting the Indian cause. They never tried to check Indian intentions. They never tried to put a check on the Indians to tell them that not you shouldn't do that. Whereas it was, I mean, as America had declared that it was a war against terror, but as far as Pakistan was concerned, it was a war to promote terror. This was being promoted, and I think the Afghan society, Afghan leadership has failed in a big way. They are not stupid people, but they were fooled. Why couldn't they see that Pakistan is sincere and Pakistan is making all efforts to bring them together on a table and then try to force some kind of unity amongst them? They sided, the Afghan leadership, they sided with India, and as you would recall, Amarullah Saleh and Abdullah Muhib, etc., what sort of language they have been using against Pakistan, what sort of narrative they have been promoting and floating against Pakistan. See, they are the criminals. They damaged our relationship with Afghanistan, and at the same time, they created this mess which they are facing today in Afghanistan because of their own personal vested interests.
Absolutely, absolutely. General Retired Amjad Shoaib, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. Now, Israel has violated ceasefire yet again, bombing Gaza after wounding dozens of Palestinians with gunfire on the border. Israeli military said its warplanes struck Hamas positions in the Gaza Strip. The recent bombings came after indiscriminate Israeli firing at a Palestinian demonstration, wounding 41 Palestinians, including 2 critically. Gaza's health ministry says the critically wounded include a 13-year-old boy who was shot in the head. An Israeli soldier was also injured in the clashes at the Gaza Strip's heavily fortified border. The protest was being carried out to draw attention against the forceful Israeli blockade of the territory. Now, Russia says it will respond robustly to the U.S. sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. In a statement, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said it is useless to put pressure on Moscow. Zakharova said Moscow views the sanctions on Washington's lack of political will to build bilateral relations based on a partnership. Meanwhile, Russian ambassador to the U.S. Anatoly Antonov termed the curbs and attempts to gain a competitive advantage for its fuel and tech suppliers. He said Moscow believes the format for using the pipeline should be determined primarily in Germany and not in the U.S. Now, Mexico has reported nearly 850 daily deaths from COVID-19 and over 20,000 new infections. Globally, the coronavirus death toll is over 4.42 million, while the caseload has surpassed 211 million. More details about the pandemic in this report. COVID numbers continue to grow despite millions of vaccines administered across the world. In the United States, the vaccine-producing company Moderna has mandated its employees and contractors to get inoculated, while CDC has instructed people at an increased risk of severe illness to avoid travel irrespective of their vaccination status. Other than shots, lockdowns are a key element to control the virus spread, but they are taxing the patience of many. In Peru, hundreds of families marched in Lima to demand the reopening of schools. President Pedro Castillo has said schools will reopen once all the citizens have an opportunity to get vaccinated.
I think the virtual education that they're receiving is not enough. Computers are not replacement to the socialization that they need for their mental health. To build friendships, children need to run, jump, talk, and play.
New Zealand's COVID cases have risen by 21 to 72, with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern warning the number will go higher in the next few days. In Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison defended the lockdown strategy, saying it would stay until at least 70% of the population is fully vaccinated. 914 cases of the highly infectious Delta variant surpassed the previous high of 894 a day earlier. The state of New South Wales reported a record 830 new locally acquired infections.
The cases at the moment are not jumping up in the sense of exponentially. They are up. They're up quite substantially in the last few days. But just in the last 2 days, of course, it's been in the 800s. I'm hoping that we will not see that major escalation.
Vietnam says it is sending troops to Ho Chi Minh City to help deliver food and aid to households. The government has further tightened restrictions on people's movements amid a worsening surge of the coronavirus. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 65 more deaths from coronavirus over the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the nationwide toll of fatalities is nearing 25,000. The ministry said the virus infected another 3,842 people overnight. Meanwhile, the positivity rate of daily infections has climbed to 7.1%. The ministry said the country's caseload has surpassed 1,123,000, of which more than 1 million have recovered. It said over 89,000 cases are active, while more than 5,300 are in critical condition. Now, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has arrived in Singapore to kick off her Southeast Asia trip in a bid to establish deeper. Harris was received at the airport by Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. She is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong on Monday and hold a joint news conference with him. The U.S. Vice President will also participate in a roundtable focused on supply chain issues. She will arrive in Vietnam on Tuesday and will become the first U.S. Vice President to visit the country. Now, in the United States, strong winds have made it difficult for the firefighters to battle the Caldor blaze in Northern California. The fire is estimated to be raging at more than 90,000 acres as containment remains at 0%. It has destroyed more than 270 buildings and forced over 30,000 people to evacuate. Meanwhile, the Dixie fire burning in the same state for 40 days now has grown over 717,000 acres. It is the second largest fire in California's history. The blaze has destroyed over 1,200 structures and has only been 36% contained so far. Now, 10 people have died while dozens others are missing after flash floods hit the eastern American state of Tennessee. Details in this report. In Tennessee, 430 millimeters of record-shattering rainfall in less than a day washed away homes and rural roads. Authorities say the rescue and search services are being hindered amid power outages all over the area. Meanwhile, Hurricane Henry is tracking towards the country's northeast and is likely to make landfall today in the areas of southern New England. Parts of the region have started feeling first impacts like heavy rain as the storm barrels closer to the region. Over in Mexico, severe flooding and landslides has killed 8 people after Hurricane Grace battered the country's eastern coast. The Category 3 hurricane whipped up maximum sustained winds of 125 miles per hour as it slammed into the coast. Authorities say the storm has resulted in torrential rains, severe flooding and mudslides. Now in Greenland, rainfall has occurred at the highest point on the ice sheet for the first time in recorded history. Scientists have warned that this is another worrying sign of rapid global warming. Last week, rain fell for several hours at the over 3,000-meter summit of Greenland's ice sheet. Scientists say it is an unprecedented occurrence for a location that rarely sees temperatures above freezing. In less than a decade, the temperature at the ice cap has gone unusually high, which is very worrisome for experts.
Well, I mean, it hasn't rained there in the past because, generally speaking, it never gets above freezing. At that latitude, that close to the pole, at that altitude, it's cold, even in the summertime.
The rain and high temperatures triggered extensive melting across the island, which suffered a surface ice mass loss.
You raise temperatures a couple degrees in the mid-latitudes, it's something you don't maybe notice even, but raising it from 1 degree below freezing to 1 degree above freezing is the difference. If you're in the Arctic Ocean, it's the difference between ice skating and swimming. And so that's where we see these small changes can have bigger effects. And they're an indicator of the bigger effects that we're starting to see now more and more in the mid-latitudes, things like more fires, more heat waves, more extreme weather.
Rising global temperatures driven by climate change have made extreme weather events more common. Greenland experienced a massive melting event in late July. Enough ice melted in a single day to cover the U.S. state of Florida in 2 inches of water. Now, Switzerland has started the construction of its largest alpine solar plant to help secure renewable energy throughout the year. The 2.2 megawatt project is part of Swiss plans to plug the gap left by the phase out of nuclear energy. Strategies to limit the impacts of climate change have become divisive in Switzerland. Under the government's Energy Strategy 2050, Switzerland plans to increase energy production from renewables and hydro generation, aiming to add 2 terawatts by 2040. The project manager says the transition is going on to a certain extent, but will eventually gain momentum.
This is the idea to have installations in other places as well, like here on a dam, on a hydropower dam, but it could be made on infrastructure in general.
The Alpine location will let the Mutsee plant deliver half its production during the winters, when sunlight is generally in short supply in Switzerland. Solar plants at lower elevations produce only around a quarter of their electricity during this half of the year. Switzerland imports electricity, especially from European Union, in the colder months. But snags in relations with the European Union mean Switzerland must urgently up its winter energy production.
Need is bigger in winter than in summer, and it will be even more so in the future. So therefore we're looking for a high alpine installation for a balanced yield, that is not only in summer but also in winter.
Nuclear power last year generated a third of the country's electricity, while fossil fuels still accounted for more than 60% of Switzerland's overall energy consumption. When it is completed, foreseeably by year-end. The Matsi will have nearly 5,000 solar modules, producing around 3.3 million kilowatt hours of electricity per year. Now, major stocks markets in the Gulf have mostly rebounded after yesterday's decline, but falling oil prices continue to weigh on Saudi Arabia. In Abu Dhabi, the index gained over 0.5%, with the country's largest lender, First Abu Dhabi Bank, and telco giant Etisalat rising nearly 1%. Dubai's main share index was up almost 1%, led by Dubai Islamic Bank and Emaar Properties. The Qatari index also edged up marginally. However, the benchmark index in Saudi Arabia fell over 0.5%, weighed down mostly by banking stocks. In football, Brighton beat newly promoted Watford 2-0 to ensure best ever start to their Premier League campaign. In their 9th season in England's top flight, it is the first time the Seagulls have won their opening 2 fixtures. Brighton defender Shane Duffy scored the opening goal on 10 minutes, while Vaz Bissouma 4 minutes before half-time. Brighton are now second on the table with 6 points, while Liverpool lead the scoreboard after a 2-0 victory over Burnley. Earlier in another fixture, Manchester City thrashed Norwich 5-0. Gabriel Jesus took City to the lead in the 7th minute, while Jack bundled in the 22nd. Aymeric Laporte made it 3-0 in the 65th minute before substitute Raheem Sterling and Riyad Mahrez completed the rout. In boxing now, Cuba's Yordanis Ugas has beaten Manny Pacquiao by a unanimous decision, retaining his WBA welterweight title. The defending champion seized his opportunity brilliantly to win on all 3 cards at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. One judge scored 115 over 113, while the other 2 counted 16 over 112 in favor of Ugas. Although he threw far fewer punches than the 42-year-old Filipino legend, but his blows were precise and effective. The 35-year-old Cuban accepted the fight on 11 days' notice after Errol Spence Jr. withdrew it amid a retinal injury. He is the winner of the bronze medal in the Beijing Olympics. And now let's have a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.